everybody, to the Nick Saban Show presented by Alpha Insurance. I'm Chris Stewart, filling in for Eli Gold once again tonight. Our media guest this evening from WVTM NBC 13, Ryan Hennessey. Again, appreciate your time and glad to hear your family's doing well. You're talking about the fact during a break, you're from Orlando, and obviously that area hit very, very hard by the hurricane the last 24 hours, but your family back there doing well, thankfully.
Mom's doing good, yeah. She didn't even lose power, so very lucky. I know some people weren't as fortunate, so definitely thoughts to the whole state. That was a tough one. 2004, I dealt with all those with Charlie and all that. It's not fun.
Tell us about how you got to Birmingham, your route, because you're still a young guy. Everybody's young to me, but you're a young guy.
Yeah, so it started in Orlando. Went to school in Jacksonville, Florida. Had my own radio show, Hen House Radio, Hennessey, kind of made the connection.
Very nice.
Got my first job in Dothan, Alabama. Went to the national championship when they played Clemson, 2 years, and made a connection. Now I'm at WVTM 13, coming up on 5 years in the state of Alabama. They can't get rid of me.
Now, why would we want to? The Wiregrass is a great place to be. Boy, they love
future
the tie
Masters
down there.
Star Chris Stewart at the Wiregrass,
no.
actually, golfer.
The Future Masters big in Dothan. Great place down there. Great people. Big Bama fans, too.
Oh, yeah.
Huge fan
Bama,
base down
Auburn,
there.
They're all over the place. They're all over the state.
Again,
but,
big Bama fans.
Right,
We don't care
exactly,
about the other, but
exactly,
big Bama fans
exactly.
there. When you got the opportunity to work within the state of Alabama, just from your perspective, covering the Crimson Tide as you have, and again, in your role, you have no preference, but you want to see good competitive teams. And certainly what you've had a chance to witness in covering multiple national championships, very, very special.
Yeah, it's definitely incredible. Being 27 years old, I've been to 2 national championships. Just went to the Heisman. My station sent me Bryce Young. Got the interview with him right after he won. It's been a special run, and just to be able to do this so early in my career, it's been awesome. And the fans, I mean, it's hard to explain it until I bring my friends here. The first place I take my friends when they visit, Bryant-Denny Stadium. So.
Before he walks in the door, I do want your perspective, not only covering a program that's had this success, but truly a coach legendary in terms of what he's already accomplished in his career.
I mean, unmatched, definitely. It's continuously growing, so it's been special, and the way he does things, I've learned more and more through the 5 years. Going on 5 years, I've covered Nick Saban. It's pretty special, and I'll let you take it away from here with an intro.
Well, with him coming in, that obviously garners everybody's attention. We had a guest a couple of weeks ago, gave a really good answer to a question, but he thought that the applause was for him until realized that Coach himself was walking in, and we're getting him set up here on the stage. The head coach, ladies and gentlemen, of the Alabama Crimson Tide, Coach Saban, always great to see you, sir.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to be here. Good to see everyone.
You know Ryan Hennessey. Met him, of course, many times from NBC affiliate in Birmingham. And good week, I hope, for you and for the Tide.
Yeah, well, this time of year, you're always battling, grinding, trying to get through it. You get some guys banged up. You got some other guys have to come through. But the players have had a pretty good attitude, and we've had a pretty good work week. But I think this is going to be a little different kind of game for us. This is a really tough team that we're playing, a very physical team. They got some really, talented guys on offense. The quarterback's really a good player. They play really physical, hard, tough defense. So, this is going to be a little different challenge for us, especially playing on the road. But we're looking forward to the challenge.
Well, Coach, the first question is brought to us by Alabama 811. Always contact 811 before you dig. To know what's below, call 811 or visit al811.com. Ryan Hennessey, you got the first one tonight.
Coach, obviously going on the road. You've been on the road before this season, but when you adjust with coaching 18, 19, 20-year-olds, the adjustment going into a game after you win a game, I know the 24-hour rule, but when you win a 55-3 game like that, and they lost a close one, do you kind of tell your team one game at a time, one day at a time? How do you prep for something like that?
Well, I think that's what you're always hoping for, that everybody can always look forward, so they're always looking forward to the next challenge. But, one of the things that if you look at it, we've only had 2 teams here in the last 14 years that went undefeated. Each other team, even though they may have had success and they may have won a championship, they all had to lose a game to get it right. So that's something that you really want to try to avoid, and I think you can avoid it if players can buy in to having the right mindset about, don't be self-indulgent. Self-indulgent is kind of, you start thinking about yourself and I don't feel good, this hurts, that hurts, I don't feel like I can practice today. Maybe you don't have your patience and don't respect other people like you should. And all those things kind of lead up to bad choices and bad decisions. And all of our good teams, the ones that have gone undefeated, they've all had great character. We have the fewest points, guys missing class, fewest, poor behaviors. And this team has been very, very good, that way. So, but the question is, and the challenge is can you sustain it? Because, I always call it rat poison, when you read about how good you are and how well you did, can you maintain the kind of focus and intensity that you need to maintain every day in practice in terms of creating the right habits and doing the right things and having the right mindset when you play good teams. And we're playing better teams now, and this is one of the better teams. This is the best team that we played so far, playing on the road. Got to be able to understand that when you play on the road, players don't like to be disrespected. But when you play on the road, you got 100,000 people trying to disrespect you. So, why get mad when one guy disrespects you in practice and you want to get in a fight over it? That's nothing. That's nothing compared to what you have to do mindset-wise to stay focused on the road to do things the way you need to do them, because there's going to be, some adversity, and you got to be able to overcome adversity, and all great competitors can do that.
You addressed it a little bit in your opening comment to the crowd, but it is an Arkansas team that's very physical. They've taken on the personality of their head coach, Sam Pittman. He's done a wonderful job everywhere he's been and really has put the stamp, his stamp on that program, it seems, and they've taken on his personality now.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. And they had a tough loss last week, very tough loss. When you fumble the ball going in, that's a 14-point swing when the other team picks it up and runs it for a touchdown. So it's the 7 you didn't score and the 7 they did score. That's 14-point swing, and then they missed a field goal at the end. So, but the thing our mindset needs to be on what we have to do, what we need to do. They can't be getting well on us if we do things the way we're supposed to do it.
Coach, let's go to the phones. Our Yellowhammer Brewing hotline, 877-202-BAMA. And, of course, we go to Grand Bay and welcome in Pee Wee. Pee Wee, go ahead.
Pee Wee.
Coach Pee Wee.
Pee Wee's not here.
That's a false start from Pee Wee. Back him up 5 yards already. I don't think that's happened before. We'll get him back here. I tell you what, Coach, let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk with Pee Wee. We'll talk more with Coach Saban, and you can be a part of the show, 877-202-BAMA, or if you've got a question here in the house at Baumhauer's Victory Grill in Tuscaloosa, we've got a microphone over here to our right, and we'll be glad to hear from you as well on the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield. 2nd and 4, play action again. Bryce looking to his right, has a man, and that is caught at the back of the end zone. But was he in bounds? Yes, touchdown Alabama. Bryce Young looking deep, has a man, Brooks is there, catch is made, touchdown Alabama. 34 yards, a perfect strike. Bryce to Jacory, and the Tide rolls now to a 20-3 advantage. Another refreshing Bama highlight presented by Yellowhammer Brewing Company. Brewed locally in Alabama and served to fans across the Southeast. Chris Stewart alongside Ryan Hennessey, WVTM NBC 13, and of course the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Coach, he tells us, Pee Wee does, the phone cord fell out of the phone. Yeah. That's why we had to back him up 5 yards for delay of show. But Pee Wee, try it again, buddy.
I'm here, Chris. I apologize for that, y'all.
Well,
Coach, how you doing, sir?
But Pee Wee, when you're asking me about false starts, when you're asking me about, the offensive line and how they make a mistake every now and then, obviously, it happens to us all, I guess, right?
Yes, sir. All day, every day.
All right, what's up, Pee Wee?
Well, y'all have talked about the environment that we're fixing to go into and the crowd noise there. And so the offensive line is going to have to be able to have their timing for the silent count. I was just wondering today, when you practice in the noise, how did that go today, and have you seen improvement from, say, like the Texas game up till now to when we're going to face that same type of environment?
Yeah, I think it was much better today. I think the first time you play on the road in an environment like that, it's always a little challenging. And especially players who don't have experience. They've never, ever been in that situation where they've had to execute and had to play, whether it's on silent count or whether you're able to clap, however you have to do it to manage the noise. So I think it's a little better. I think, with some games under our belt, and I think this playing at Texas is probably going to be, one of the best, not necessarily advantages, but from an experience standpoint, at least we got a game under our belt where we played in a tough environment and the players have had to deal with this. So, hopefully we'll be able to execute pretty well there.
Coach, we've got a question for a gentleman over here to our left. If you would just say your name, please, and go ahead and say your question. John McWilliams.
Yeah. Hey, Coach, I just had a question. I know we were talking about the offensive line, but Arkansas has one of the biggest offensive lines that we'll face. How do you prevent a team like that from just leaning on you and wearing you out in the fourth quarter?
Well, the thing I think their offensive line is they're very physical. They play with a lot of toughness. These guys are determined to be able to run the ball. And the quarterback runs that they have, really complements the running game. But their offensive line does a really good job, and they don't make a lot of mistakes. They know exactly what they're doing. They know how to do it. They play with good fundamental technique, and they're physical and they're tough. But, Sam was an offensive line coach, so this group kind of mirrors, we tried to hire him here because I thought he was one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. I forget how long ago it was, but it was a while back. And this group reflects that. But they do a great job of running the ball, using quarterback runs, making all 11 players on defense play the running plays by, running zone street. Quarterback pulls the ball, has somebody to throw it to, or has somebody lead blocking with them. So, and then they do a great job in the play-action game taking shots down the field to make a lot of explosive plays. That's really what hurt us last year in the game. We played their plays pretty good, but they made 3 or 4 really big plays. That, were tough. And then, these guys are a little atypical on third down, too, because if it's 3rd and 6 or less, they'll run the ball 50% of the time. All right, so you can't just put a whole bunch of defensive backs in there and a bunch of guys that can pass rush because they'll just run the ball. So you got to stay sound on about every down and distance that you play them. And they do a really, really good job. I mean, they rush it for 430-some yards and pass it for about the same. So this is a pretty dynamic offense. And defensively, they're tough. They're physical up front. They play hard. Their secondary is very aggressive. So it's going to be a challenging game for us. And they have 20 sacks, with their defense, which leads the SEC. They do a really good job pressuring the quarterback. So we're going to have to do a good job up front, both sides of the ball.
Coach, our first question from the Nick Saban Show thread at AL.com comes from James in Double Springs, Alabama. He says, hey, Coach, Arkansas has a big, strong, mobile quarterback with a good arm. Who does he remind you of that we've played in the past? Thank you, and Roll Tide from James in Double Springs.
Well, I don't think it's fair to compare him to anybody that we played in the past because in and of himself, he is a really, really good player. I mean, this guy is big. He's physical. He's really hard to sack. He always falls forward when he runs the ball. He run behind his pads, run over guys if he has to. So it's unusual to have a guy that has that kind of a mindset that plays the quarterback position. But he's got a really, really good arm, strong arm. He's an accurate passer. He extends plays and can extend plays not just to run, but extend plays and then throw the ball down the field. So this guy is really, really talented and really good player, and we'll have to do a great job of controlling him, that's for sure. And sometimes you got to have a mirror on him, so when he does break out of the pocket, you got somebody breaking to him so he can't run for first downs. He hurt us last year, converting long yardage situations by just taking off and running.
He is big, he is fast, physical, all of that. It used to be that you would hear that a quarterback had to be a certain height to play. Yep. They used to talk about Doug Flutie years ago. He's good, but he's too small, can't do this, can't do that. But I think about how things have changed now in a play against Texas where, frankly, if Bryce is your prototypical quarterback at about 6'3", 6'4", he probably gets his head taken off by a defender. Instead, he was able to duck under a play or a player late make a big run. I guess my point in all of this is how things seem to have changed where the height of the quarterback doesn't really matter based on what the offenses are doing now.
Well, I think the spread offense has made it just like basketball. You know, basketball before the three-point shot was a big man's game. But, you know, guys my size who could shoot threes all of a sudden, you know, could play the game. Stand out on the three-point line, throw it in the big guy, throw it back out to them. And so when you spread the field, you know, you don't have to be that big to be able to see because you can see outside. And I think, you know, when you got a guy that's a good decision maker like Bryce, he's got great touch, he's very accurate, he's smart, you know, puts himself in the right position and the right play and throws the ball to the right guy most of the time. Those guys can be very proficient playing as well. I think you have to have a unique talent to do that, but I've said this before, you know, Bryce plays quarterback a lot like a point guard that's really, really efficient like John Stockton or somebody, you know, that makes a lot of good choices and decisions and gets the ball in the right place, and he's athletic enough to extend plays and make plays with his feet if he has to. So I don't think that the typical size thing was the old-fashioned NFL drop-back, you know, playing in the box type quarterback. I don't think that's necessary, you know, in this day and age.
You hear that? We can play quarterback now. You hear that? There's
hope. You
There's
can
hope.
play quarterback. I can't even play it on a video game. Let's go to Millersville, Georgia, Coach, and the Yellowhammer Hotline, where Adam is up next.
Hi, Coach. Thanks for taking my question. I was just wondering, when you're preparing your players for a game like this, do you find it harder to motivate young people now than, say, 20 years ago to do the right things? And when you're recruiting, how do you recognize athletes with the intangibles, like the maturity and judgment, that's going to make them successful people and players at Alabama?
Yeah, I think that I don't know if it's harder to motivate guys now. I just think you have to do it a little differently. I think, you know, players are much more, you know, you got to motivate them because they're all trying to create value for their future. All right, so it's not really selfish. It's just self-absorbed. You know, how does it affect me? So, you know, sometimes you got to play to that to try to motivate them, to show them that, hey, this is the value that you're trying to create. Tell me how this behavior that you're using right now is really helping you create that value. Like I said to a guy once this week, I said, you know, you want to create value for your future, but who's going to pay for that? Who's going to pay for that, what you just did? Who will pay for that? Tell me somebody, you want to create value, you want to play in the NFL, you want to get paid for playing someday. Who is going to pay for that? So I would have never said that to a player 20 years ago. All right, but to answer the second part of your question, I think one of the most difficult things in recruiting is to really find out if a guy does have the right intangibles. You know, if a guy really is, if football is really important to him. I think because there's so much attention now with young players. You know, some players play the game for the attention that they get, and some people play the game for the love of the game. And you want the guys that play for the love of the game, all right, because, you know, they're going to be focused on being the best players that they can be, and they're not going to be affected about what other people think as much. And but that's very, very difficult to find out. And, you know, we have like 13 questions that we ask about players that we recruit, whether it's to their teachers, to their coaches, to their guidance counselors, to try to find out. And I have 3 questions that I always ask players. And one of them is, what do you think you need to do to be a very good college football player? So if I'm talking to a guy that weighs 350 pounds and he's 25 pounds overweight, and he tells me nothing, I'm saying, I don't think this guy's got the right stuff.
Right.
Because he can't self-assess and he doesn't know what he needs to do to be a good player. So I'm just using that as an example, but you have to ask questions, and you have to ask specific questions about, you know, to try to find out truly what a guy's character is. But most of the time, the really, really good players, you know, they have the right stuff. That's why they're really good players. And if you look at history and you'll pay attention to the history, Like if you have a guy that's got kicked off the team or he transferred schools 3 times because he wasn't getting to play or wasn't getting to do what he wanted to do, and even though he's a talented guy, to think that you're not going to have some of those same issues with the guy when he gets here is probably not a good decision.
Ryan, you got another one for Coach?
Coach, this is a team game, and a lot of people, I've been lucky to cover this program for coming up on my 5th year, and I noticed I went to the Texas game. One of the first people in that press room after is Miss Terry. What does Miss Terry mean to this whole team and this whole program that people don't get to see? We were in a small room when you guys won that game against us. What do you see? Because it seems like she's front row right now as well. What does she mean to this program?
Well, I think more than you know, more
right
than anybody knows, and I'm not going to look at her while I say this, but, you know, first of all, she's one of the best recruiters that, I mean, the players love her, the parents love her, the people, she does a great job, got great people skills, so everybody feels at home, and it sort of gives everybody the feeling of family, right, which is what you're always trying to create. You know, you need a village of people to support these guys, whether it's personally, academically, athletically, and, you know, to have good wives in the organization, and Miss Terry's great. Second thing is to support me, because football season is tough. It's not family friendly. I'm not home very much. We don't get to talk very much. We don't get to do anything really together. She has opportunities to do things that she chooses not to do because she's worried about me. All right, and I think, you know, that's, you know, pretty special, and I appreciate it more than you know, and I don't get to tell her that very often, but I'm telling her now.
I've never told you this story before, but I was in the press conference the day that you were introduced as the head football coach at the University of Alabama. You may or may not remember, Miss Terry may have interjected 2 or 3 times during your address to the crowd. When it was over,
More importantly, she interjected 2 or 3 times when we were getting interviewed.
I understand, and we're grateful for that.
In fact, on my way home, I don't know if I've told this story before, but you know, you have your final meeting with the players. Players go through exit physicals. I'm talking about when I'm at the Miami Dolphins. So I talked to the team, and, you know, I just said, you know, I'm staying here, no problem. So I'm driving home, and I called Miss Terry, and I say, because I knew Mal was supposed to come over, you know, that night, and I said, you know, I want you to call Mal and tell him I'm not interested in talking to him, and ask him not to come over. And she said, he's already here. So I had no choice.
Well, along those lines, when the press conference ends, a friend of mine and I are sitting there after, again, she'd interjected a couple of times, and I said, well, there's a new sheriff in town talking about you. And my friend says, yep, and her name is Terry.
Yeah.
We will take a break, and then we'll be back with more of the Nick Saban Show right here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield.
Setting up in the pocket, dumping it off across the middle, Gibbs, 25, Gibbs, 20, Gibbs, zigging, zagging, 15, still on his feet, down to the 10, down to the 7-yard line, Jahmyr Gibbs fighting for extra yardage, setting up first and goal, Alabama, a gain of 26. On the snap, Latu shifting to the right side. Here comes the snap. Young swings it out. Gibbs zigging to his left, cutting inside the 5, into the end zone. Touchdown, Alabama. Jahmyr Gibbs. He earned that one after getting a great block from Cameron Latu along the way.
This segment of the Nick Saban Show is brought to you by Coca-Cola Zero Sugar. Zero sugar and refreshingly delicious. Hey, is Coca-Cola Zero Sugar the best Coke ever? Well, find out for yourself. We are back here at Baumhauer's Victory Grill. More of Hey Coach with Nick Saban and also our media guest, Ryan Hennessey from WVTM 13. Coach, we're going to go back to the Yellowhammer Brewing hotline, and Bart in Scottsboro's got our next question for you. Go ahead, Bart.
Hey, Coach, Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Hey, I was just wondering, how's the 12-game playoff going to work?
Well, I'm not sure for sure, but from what I've heard to this point, you know, it would be 12 teams in the playoff, and there would be so many teams that had a bye, maybe, I don't know, 6, however the numbers work out. Maybe the top 4 teams get a bye, 8 teams play a game, so there's now 8 teams left, and probably the first 4 seeds get a bye. And it would add games, to the season. So I think it's something that we all have to examine in terms of how many games or too many games for college football players to play. There's been several occasions where we played 15 games, and that's really tough, for young people who are going to college. They're college students first and got to go through finals week and all that. And so I know fans would have a tremendous amount of interest. I think it would create a tremendous amount of interest because, now all people talk about is the playoffs. So now we only have 4 teams involved. So maybe late in the season, in November, everybody's talking about 7, 8, 9 teams that have a chance to get in the playoffs. Well, if you had 12 teams in the playoffs, you'd be talking about 30 teams who had a chance to get in the playoffs. So that would probably create a lot more interest. And, I've always been a great defender of bowl games, but bowl games have become less and less significant since we have a playoff. And I think if we use the bowl games to play these playoff games, that would be a good thing. But there has been some talk that the first round of the playoffs would be actually played in home stadiums. So that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. I mean, you could be a Southern team in our conference, including us, having to go to Wisconsin to play, in December or January, right, which would be, totally different. And it might be totally different for them to have to come down here and play. So, but that's how they do it in the NFL, and it's good for the game. So I think that's probably how it will work, but nobody knows for sure quite yet.
Coach, our second question from the Nick Saban Show thread at AL.com is from David in Navarre Beach, Florida. He says, "Hey, Coach, are there things that our team learned from our first road trip to Texas that will help us on Saturday in Fayetteville? Looking forward to a great game and Roll Tide," from David in Navarre Beach, Florida.
Yeah, I think that's one of the first things that I said to the team after the Texas game, David, was we have a lot to learn from this game. There was a lot of things that we could learn, from the game. First of all, we didn't play with consistency. We had 15 penalties. We didn't handle the crowd noise very well. There was a lot of things that you can build on and learn from in the game. But one thing that I think you have to give the players a lot of credit for is, we had 189 yards of total offense in the fourth quarter. We actually showed great resiliency in the game to be able to come back in a game twice in the fourth quarter to win the game in, tough circumstances and a tough environment. So the competitive spirit of the team was good, and they were able to overcome adversity. So when you have those intangibles, it's easy to build on the other things. But, we had some guys that we preached all week how hot it was going to be out there and how difficult it was going to be to play in, that environment. And you have to take really good care of yourself going into the game. And we had a couple guys that went down with cramps and different things that almost cost us the game. We had one guy running off the field, and a guy ran in, didn't even know the coverage. We busted the coverage, and, they hit the pass that put them in field goal range. So all these things are lessons that players can learn, not only just in the game, but how do you have to prepare yourself so that you can play the game.
Coach, we've got another question from a gentleman here at Baumhauer's.
How you doing today, Coach?
I'm good, thank you.
My name's Joe. Yeah, I just want to ask you one question a little bit. I know that I've seen a little bit of Jalen Milroe take a lot of, snaps and stuff, but how would you feel about his development? Because I hear a lot of, I see a lot of good in Jalen Milroe, and I see him develop, and more I see him take snaps.
Development of Jalen Milroe. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, Jalen has done a really nice job. He's made a tremendous amount of improvement from last year to this year, as a passer, as a guy that understands the offense, who can read the defense a little bit better. We have put him in games, but we have never really done things that he can do really well in the game. He would be a guy that would be really great running some quarterback runs with, that would be completely different than what Bryce does. And when we put him in the game, we're really trying to help him develop in our offense the things that we can do if he had the play, we would probably feature things that he could do better. So he'd even, be more effective, I think. But his ability to extend plays and run and scramble and make plays with his feet is something that really, really is difficult for defenses to adjust to. And, he's made some plays like that this year, and he's made some good throws. But, in every game that he plays, there's things that he learns. Like sometimes we have an RPO, and he threw it into cover 2, once. Well, you want middle of the field coverage to be able to throw that RPO. If they're playing split safeties, just hand the ball off. They don't have as many guys in the box. So there's always things that players learn. And as much as you practice it, sometimes when the game comes, that's really when they can learn it the best because they have to make the decisions under fire. But he has made really good progress, and we're pleased with, the way he's developing.
Coach, let's work in another caller real quick. Ricky from Hueytown's up next. Go ahead, Ricky.
Hey, Coach. How you doing tonight?
Good, Ricky. How are you?
I'm doing good. I wanted to ask you this. Arkansas is a very physical football team. You've talked about that all week. So when it comes to the coin toss this week, are you going to take offense or defense, or are you just going to elect to kick ass?
I can't even remember the last time we won the toss. We always have a plan for what we're going to do if we win the toss, but about the last 3 or 4 games, I think the other teams won the toss. So, but we always make a decision based on circumstances. Like, number one, you're playing on the road, all right? So you take the ball first, you got to deal with a lot of things offensively that you don't have to deal with on defense if you play defense first. So you're talking about deferring. In a close game, you'd always rather have the ball in the second half. The other thing that, affects the coin toss to me is what's the wind conditions? How is the wind going to affect the game? Because if the wind's going to affect the game, you want the wind in the fourth quarter. And the only way you can get the wind in the fourth quarter for sure is you got to take the ball. Because if you take the ball, the other team has to take the ball, so you get to decide what goal you want to defend in the third quarter. Does that make any sense? So you can play against the wind. And, I tell these stories all the time, and I'm sure you heard them. When I was a coach at Toledo, I wasn't smart enough my first year as a head coach to know that, so we play at Central Michigan. There's about a 40-mile-an-hour wind. All right, so we tie for the Mid-American Conference Championship because we lost this game. I think it was 16-14 or 14-13 or something like that. But we go down in 2 minutes, and we're against the wind, and we have a really good kicker, and we got the ball on the 20-yard line. So this is like, I don't know, maybe a 40-yard field goal at the most. And it gets about 5 yards from the goal post and just stops in midair because we're against the wind. And what people don't understand about the Bluegrass Miracle, there was about a 30-mile-an-hour wind that game, and we were smart enough to get the wind in the fourth quarter. And when we threw that pass 75 yards in the air, it would have never gone 75 yards in the air if it wasn't a 30-mile wind carrying it. And their defensive players would have not misjudged the ball like they did because the wind just kept carrying the ball. Somebody tipped it up, and the guy caught it on a dead run, Devery Henderson. So I think having the wind in the fourth quarter is really important. Now, if the wind's not a factor in the game, then you just how you want to start the game first. And you want to start on offense when they got 85,000 people who've been chomping at the bit for a whole week to see how much noise they can make, see if they can mess your offense up, or would you just rather play defense?
Coach, I've been covering your program for 5 years. This is my 5th year now, 2 years in Dothan, 3 years now in Birmingham. The press conferences definitely, some newer reporters, they ask, you can't ask hypotheticals, you can't ask comparisons, you don't like going there. But to bring a comparison, we got this game on right now. Obviously, Tua having an amazing year, and then you have Jalen Hurts. What was that like that year when you were picking between the two? Was that one of the hardest decisions? Because look at what they're doing. I wrote it down, 3rd and 2nd in passing right now in the NFL. Just incredible season by both of them.
Well, Mac Jones was in the room, too.
He is. He's on the NFL team, too, I think.
So, well, I think it was a very difficult decision. You know, Jalen was 26-2 as a starter. the end of that season, he, for whatever reasons, maybe it was our fault, I'm not blaming him, he was struggling a little bit. We struggled at Auburn offensively. And when we played Georgia in I knew that we weren't going to be able to win this game if we couldn't throw the ball. And we were struggling throwing the ball, and we had pretty good skill guys. And Jalen made a lot of plays with his feet, but that didn't always take advantage of the other guys. So when we got behind in the game 13-0 at halftime, I said, there's no way we can't run the ball against these guys. If we can't get to them in the back end, we're not going to have a chance to win. And we were like 4 for 9 or something for, I don't know, 50 yards or something in the first half passing. So I just said, you know, we've got to give Tua a chance. But Tua had developed nicely throughout the season and played a lot throughout the season. So then it came down to we had like 4 first-round draft picks playing wide receiver at the time. 3 of them were playing at the end of the game when we won the national championship game. Ruggs, Judy, and Smitty caught the pass. They were all out there playing. They were all freshmen. Leatherwood was a freshman playing left tackle. Najee Harris was a freshman playing tailback. Tua was a freshman playing quarterback. So we had 6 true freshmen out on the field, all right, when we won that game. So then it became, okay, how do we best utilize the skill guys? And Tua played pretty well, and Tua played pretty well the next year. And to Jalen's credit, and I think this is the biggest thing that helped him become an NFL quarterback. He stayed at Alabama, and I told him, I said, look, you need to develop to become a better passer. You want to play in the NFL. You're a great athlete. You have to focus on what you need to do every day in practice to become a better quarterback in the passing game. Decision-making, judgment, accuracy, all those things. And God bless him, he did it. And he got better. And then when he had to play, when Tua got hurt, he was a lot better. And I think that's what helped him, you know, when he went to Oklahoma. You know, and we made that decision together too. You know, he said, well, I'm going to go to Miami or I'm going to go to Maryland because Dan Enos was the offensive coordinator at Miami and Locks was at Maryland. He said, well, I know those guys. I said, who got the best players on offense? He said, Oklahoma. I said, that's where you need to go. Because you're going to play quarterback, you got to have good players around you if you're going to be able to play good.
Almost won the Heisman that year.
Yeah. So, and hell, I told him to do it, knowing that we might have to play against him. But it still was best for him. It was what was best for him, and it's worked out very well for him. And I'm so happy to see how well he's doing, how well Smitty's doing, how well Dickerson's doing, how well Philadelphia's doing. That's great.
Great stuff indeed. We are back, and we'll have the final word from Coach after this on the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield.
Under a minute to go, 45 seconds. This is likely the last snap we'll see. Handoff goes to Miller, pushes forward, 30, still on his feet, 20, 15, 10, 5, why not? Jamarian Miller, touchdown, Alabama, 40 yards, and the Crimson Tide gets over the 50-point mark once again.
This is the Nick Saban Show presented by Alpha Insurance. For auto, home, and life insurance, call Alpha. Ryan Hennessey from WVTM NBC 13 has been our media guest tonight. Coach, he's got one more question for you.
Coach, obviously going into this game, you've got a guy you know pretty well, and it's got to be pretty neat to see Drew Sanders do a really good job for Arkansas. What's your take on just the success going back to play him now?
Yeah, Drew's playing really, really well for him. You know, he's got like 5.5 sacks or something like that, and he's playing money for him, so he's really playing inside linebacker, which is where we would have probably ended up playing him, you know, here. He had played outside backer before that, but since we had pretty good guys at that position, he was one of the better players on our team, so we were looking for a spot to play him. But I'm happy to see him do well. You know, he's a fine young man. He did a good job for us here, and you know, you always like to see guys like that do well. We hated to lose him, but you know, the way college football is right now, you got to be able to deal with those kind of things.
Coach, time for the final word from you, and as always, it's presented by Mercedes-Benz.
Well, you know, first of all, I didn't get a chance to speak to this, but you know, there's a lot of people in the state of Florida who really have been victims of a horrible horrible hurricane. We personally are affected by that in our house in Boca Grande, but just knowing that area and knowing how devastating, all that is, that, I want everybody to know our thoughts and prayers are with all the folks that have been impacted and affected, by this, and would encourage, folks to try to help out. That's one of the things that, we always try to do when there's a tough circumstance someplace, whether it's a hurricane or a flood or whatever. There's a lot of people in a lot of need, and I would encourage people to try to, help any way that they can, and I know, we'll try to do the same. But anyway, about the game, I think it takes a single-minded single-minded sense of purpose in terms of when you go on the road and when you play a team like this. So you really got to be focused on what it takes to play winning football, and you got to do it on a consistent basis. And that's the only solution. That's the only solution there is. You're playing against good teams. You're playing in tough circumstances. Great competitors should like those kinds of circumstances. They should embrace them. But I think it's very helpful to us when, we have great fans there. And, when we walk in the tunnel and everybody sees our fans, it doesn't make you feel like you're alone. And we appreciate that probably more than you know. And would encourage everybody to come down when the bus gets there, because that really is helpful to our players. And we're going to need all the support and help that we can get because we're playing a really good team, but we're excited about the challenge.
Coach, always appreciate the time. Great to see you as always.
All right, thank you. Appreciate y'all.
Kickoff time again set for 2:30. Radio coverage on the network will begin at 11:30. Hey, Coach, and the Nick Saban Show are presented by Alpha Insurance. Protect your cars, home life, and business with Alpha. Get a quote or find a local agent at alphainsurance.com.